Welcome to the Kennedy Report. I'm Kennedy Hall. Well, apparently Pope John Paul II, revealed himself to a cloistered nun, and he said some pretty interesting things, allegedly, according to this apparition. Not least of which was that Benedict was still Pope, and also that he had basically been saved from damnation and spent some time in purgatory. And there are other things as well. Now, I'm going to get to this in just a second here. But I want everyone to know that we're going to discuss why I'm very skeptical of this, and also the dangers in private revelation as well. But before we continue, if you could like this video and subscribe to this channel, click the link in the description to help us grow in our efforts here. As you can see, I'm still in the rudimentary studio that we're working on right now. I've got the foam on the wall to help me with sound normalization. In any case, big things are coming down the pike and we need your help. Please visit the link in the description as well. So apparently this is something that came out a few days ago. It's from a website called Intercession Prayers. And essentially, according to the author of this blog, and this is kind of circulating around, there's a video of someone speaking about it in Spanish. And it says, St. John Paul II appears and delivers message to cloistered nun in her cell. The following is a testimony written in Spanish from a religious sister named Benedicta of the Cross from an undisclosed cloistered convent to avoid persecution. That's my first alarm bell, but we'll talk about that as we go. The testimony was sent to and published by a Catholic journalist from Spain named Arturo and his channel Oración, Formación y Acción Católica. Okay, that's his channel. Anyway, so here's how the apparition of John Paul II to this nun apparently went. She wrote, I was in my cell. It was 11:35 a.m. Was praying the Holy Rosary and pleaded to God today that by the intercession of Our Lady of the Rosary, she may intercede for our church, which is so divided. As she sees herself so shaken by tempestuous storms, I thought about the missionaries and how difficult it is for them in these times to propagate and defend Christian faith and morality. I thought about the ruptures among the families, the loss of Christian values. Anyway, it goes on and on to talk about all the issues. She says, I was praying in the third decade of the Rosary when before me appeared Karol Wojtyła, Pope John Paul II. I was surprised to see him. I guess you would be. He was standing with radiant splendor. He was quite rejuvenated as in the early years of his pontificate. He was dressed all in white like a pope and wore on top a reddish-purple mantle which shone extraordinarily. On his chest, he carried a very beautiful crucifix of emeralds and gold. He held in his right hand a rosary made of pearls, which shone beautifully. And in the other hand, he carried a beautiful, very green olive palm. Anyway, she goes on to describe his appearance more. And she goes, I understood that he wanted me to continue praying the rosary with him, and so I did. He counted the beads with his rosary, and at the end, according to this nun's testimony, which is alleged, John Paul II said, let us pray for the unity of the church, for families, for the propagation of the faith, and for the defense of the Eucharist. So apparently they went on to pray some more prayers together, an Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory be to the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Now she also says, according to this text, that they prayed the rosary in Latin. Now, it continues, it says, we finished praying the rosary and I immediately asked him, Holy Father, may I ask you a question and write them? A few questions and write them. And he replied, yes, you can and must. Sister Benedicta said, Holy Father, why have we prayed the rosary in Latin? John Paul II said, apparently, because it's the universal language of the church. Then Sister Benedicta said, Holy Father, I am so glad to see you in such glorious manner. And he responded, after having passed a brief period between purging fire, so purgatory, I now enjoy the beatific vision of the holy and undivided Trinity. I then said, Holy Father, this is Sister Benedicta speaking, why have you a palm in your hand? And he replied, to be vicar of Christ includes resembling his Lord in all respects, even until having reached martyrdom. She said to him, Holy Father, pardon my question, but what was the reason for having passed through purgatory if they canonized your holiness almost immediately? He responded, saying, Daughter, the church is holy because her head is holy, not her members above all. The vicar of Christ on earth is man. As man, he errs because he is a sinner. I, in my condition as vicar of Christ on earth, committed various errors, some obliged to the circumstances. Here in eternity, everything is paid, and it is judged unto us with great severity, the flock entrusted to our care, and of every soul we are held accountable. She asks, well, I'm paraphrasing, but if you went to purgatory, what's your salvation owed to? And he says it was due to the abandonment that I made of myself to God and to the Mother of our Lord, to whom I always ask for help and direction by means of the Holy Rosary. It was she whom at the end of my earthly life defended me from the wiles of the evil one who prowled about me. She saved my soul from condemnation. So apparently, according to this apparition, the Virgin Mary saved Pope John Paul II from going to hell. This is some pretty explosive news if this is, well, I believe we're going to go into it, but there you go. But she says, well, Holy Father, why do you speak of condemnation if your pontificate was good? And Pope John Paul II allegedly said, nobody knows the scales in eternity, but in eternity all must pass through God's justice. The mercy of God is infinite. Anyway, she goes, Holy Father, what is happening in the church? Why so much confusion? He responded to her, the church is living the passion of Christ, and as the bride must imitate her husband until their full consummation. She must pass through fire and be purged until becoming holy and free of rust. Everything is in God's plan, and that is how it is written that it should happen. Humanity has not desired to listen to the voice of the church and of her Lord, and now the time of harvest has arrived. The harvest is ripe, and the harvesters are willing to fulfill their work. The militant church, Church Militant, must be one with the triumphant church, but before then must pass through the purification because she has strayed from the true path, which is Christ, and pursues a spirit that does not come from God. Finally, this is the money thing here, one of the money things. So not only did the Blessed Mother, apparently, according to this apparition, save John Paul II from hell, which is possible, the Blessed Mother saves people. Sister Benedicta asks, Holy Father, is Benedict XVI still Pope? Pope John Paul II said, yes. Sister Benedicta said, Holy Father, then who is Pope Francis? He responded, humanity has freely chosen its own scourge of purification, and God has allowed it to be. With it, they are fulfilling the scriptures. He doesn't say where, but Sister Benedicta says, Holy Father, may I ask you one last question? He responded, yes, Sister Benedicta. Holy Father, what must we do? He said, continue to pray the Holy Rosary, listen to God's voice, and fulfill his commandments, as well as the law which he has left you. Okay. And then apparently he gives her a blessing. Okay. So that is the alleged apparition of Pope John Paul II to this nun. I don't buy it. I'm very skeptical of it, and I'm going to go over some reasons why here. So right here I printed this out from, you can't see it because of the light, but it's Private Revelations and the Discernment of Spirits by Father William Most. He was an incredible author, okay, incredible priest. Wrote a lot of great works, very traditional, very good. And he writes on Private Revelations, and there's a lot here. I'm just going to go through some of the money quotes that we can use for this. And he quotes St. John of the Cross, and he paraphrases from it. And he says, St. John of the Cross, who was a doctor of the church and probably the greatest of mystical theologians, so he's sort of a doctor of mysticism. He says, he strongly reproves anyone who desires to be the recipient of a vision or a revelation. He says, because they desire to see, whereas faith holds on without seeing. For evidence of that, see St. Paul. He also talks about St. Teresa of Avila. And this is in her Interior Castle. He quotes, I will only warn you that when you learn or hear that God is granting souls these graces, apparitions and things, you must never beg or desire him to lead you by this road. So St. Teresa of Avila is warning against this idea of wanting these apparitions. She even continues, she says, even if you think it is a very good one, there are certain reasons why such a course is not wise. Okay, now I'm not saying I know that this nun was asking for this apparition, but that's just something to remember because people get very curious about these things. But there are various causes of error in revelations that we need to look at here. For one, faulty interpretations of visions by a recipient. So St. John of the Cross warns about this in his works, and it talks about, for example, St. Joan of Arc in prison had a revelation that she would be delivered by a great victory. It was her martyrdom that was the victory, but that's not how she had interpreted it at the time. He also says, human action may mingle with the divine action. So essentially, he uses an example here of St. Catherine Labouré, foretold many events correctly, but failed on others. In essence, saying, these visions may be given to people, but they're not given some infallible charism that they'll be able to interpret them properly. Okay. He continues, a true revelation may later be altered involuntarily by the recipient. So what we see, for example, is that we have a nun here who is apparently giving something to some journalist who's then putting it on YouTube. So who knows? And he adds to that and he says, secretaries may alter without intending to do so. Now, this is really important here. The accuracy of the text is disputed. He's giving an example here. In the works of Mary of Agreda, Catherine Emmerich, and Mary Lataste. It has been shown that 32 passages from the latter have been taken word for word from St. Thomas's Summa Theologica. Similarly, compilers sometimes modify them. The first edition of Catherine Emmerich had St. James the Elder present at the death of the Blessed Virgin. When it was seen that this was incompatible with the Acts of the Apostles, it was dropped in later editions. Magdalene of the Cross was a Franciscan of Cordova, born in 1487, who entered a convent at the age of 17. From the age of 5, the devil appeared to her as various saints, led her to desire to be considered a saint. At 13, he said who he was, offered an agreement. So this is a deal with the devil for a woman who's apparently seeing saints. He would spread her reputation for holiness and give her at least 30 years of pleasures. She agreed, and it all came true. Ecstasies, levitation, prophecies, simulated stigmata. At the door of death, she confessed, and she needed an exorcism. There's a pretty stark warning. You can also suffer from an overactive imagination, Father Most says. This could be true here. There's a lot of stuff here that could be imagination. Also, you could have an illusion in thinking that you remember things that never happened. Who knows? And also, he says the devil may give false visions or revelation. So again, people dispute whether Pope Benedict is still the Pope, but if this nun is praying for unity, and then a former Pope comes back and says that the right Pope right now isn't actually the Pope, I have no idea how that helps with unity. So I don't get that at all. Father Most also says humility is a major key because Satan has the greatest horror of it. Satan can lead a person to false humility, however. Pride shows in contempt for others, in an independent spirit as to the superior and the spiritual director, in obstinate in opinions, in refusal to submit to examinations. And this is key. It shows too, this false humility and this pride, it shows too in desiring to publish the graces the person thinks he has received when it is not necessary. Humility leads to wanting to hide them, except in cases where it is really useful. That is the one here where I went, this is probably a fraud. And the reason for that is because she went to a journalist who put it on the internet. If you are, let's compare this to other apparitions that have been approved, like Fatima. The children did everything they could not to tell everybody. And if you know the story, Sister Lucy was extremely upset with the younger ones for revealing what had happened. Then there was a process of persecution. There was a process of, and also, it says at the beginning of this, she didn't want to give her name because she wanted to avoid persecution. A person who is truly united with God would not want to avoid persecution. Christ said, if they hate you, it's because they hated me first. The life of a Christian is in many ways a life of persecution. This thing, in my opinion, stinks to high heaven. It doesn't mean that what was said might also be true. It's possible to have an imagination and imagine things that are not against the faith. But it's completely another thing to say that this isn't a real revelation. I personally think it's nonsense. The fact that it was from a nun who's cloistered, who wants to avoid being persecuted, but also at the same time wants to share everything, hasn't gone through her superior. And also, if you know how cloistered nuns live, okay, cloistered nuns, even if you go to a seminary that's a decent seminary, they won't even give you internet access except for in very limited exceptions. If you're a cloistered nun, you're in your cell. What do they just have a laptop there? Does that sound like something a cloistered nun would do? If they do have the internet, they probably have one computer that they have to have time for, and they have to petition to be able to use it. And then they also have one email account, because I know, for example, this is how good seminaries and convents work. I'm sorry, but this is not the way that the church works. This is not the way that private revelations work when they're legitimate. She didn't go to a superior. She didn't go to a confessor. This is nothing like Sister Lucy, for example. This is just a woman who apparently, according to a website that's been translated with no proof of who it was at an undisclosed location, is apparently seeing Pope John Paul II and saying Benedict's not the Pope. I think it's crazy. So there are dangers in private revelations. If they're not approved, it's a real issue. And even if they are approved, they can be a danger in that. I'm going to talk about that in a video in the upcoming days and maybe week or so. Finally, so some people have asked if I'm still working for the Fatima Center. I'm not. Great place, wonderful stuff. I just, have gone out and done my own thing. And I also work for LifeSite News right now. So this show of mine is not produced by the Fatima Center. It's just produced by me. Yes, so this is not a Fatima Center thing. This is just Kennedy Hall. So if there's any confusion on that, I hope that helps. At any rate, beware of private revelations that are not approved. There's a lot of danger in them. And please like this video and subscribe to this channel. Visit the links in the description to find out how you can support the show. The help has been overwhelming, and we're really appreciative of it. You can go to thekennedyreport.com to find all the information. All right, I'm Kennedy Hall. Until next time, God bless.